Hi, I'm Ellie from Midwife Diaries. I've got a question for you today. Have you ever wondered how we should be best supporting midwives in psychological distress? This is a subject really close to my heart because I know many midwives who've suffered emotional or other kinds of trauma because midwifery is such a demanding job. Now, I'm really excited to be interviewing Sally Pezaro, who is a researcher putting together an online tool to try and help the mental health of midwives. Sally is a researcher, but she also has a professional background in midwifery and also communications, graphic design and social media. She has a master's in leadership in health and social care, and she also has some experience doing charity work, both supporting mental illness and global midwifery. I know that her project, her online tool, is hotly awaited by NHS trusts and organisations, and that's why I'm so glad she found some time to talk to us today.
Okay, so Sally, thank you so much for agreeing to being interviewed. I know that doing a PhD is a massive time commitment, so I really appreciate you coming in, giving us some of your knowledge.
Welcome. Yeah, I'm pleased to meet with you and chat about mutual interests.
Mutual interests, indeed. So just to explain, the way we got in contact originally was you were kind enough to repost an article on bullying that I wrote, and when I posted this article onto Midwife Diaries, I got this outpouring of comments and messages and emails, and they were about psychological distress from midwives, or they were about bullying. The two were kind of interlinked. So I started to look around because I was thinking, gosh, how can I help with this big issue? And I came across your blog, which is Healthy Stuff for Healthy Patients.wordpress. Is that right?
Correct, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that's it,
so
yeah.
I'll put a link to it down the bottom of this video. And I realised that you were doing this incredibly interesting PhD. So my first question is, can you explain what you're doing currently and why you think it's important to midwives today?
Okay, well, I'm a PhD researcher at Coventry University, and I had this idea for a 3-year project to create an evidence-based intervention to help midwives in psychological distress, any type of psychological distress. But I wanted it to be evidence-based, not just build it and see how we go, because it's much more likely to actually work and people take it on board and be adopted by kind of the NHS or other big organisations who may find it to be of use. So obviously that's a long research process. You have to ask people, what do they want, how should it work, what kind of things do you need, what are the issues, why are you in psychological distress, and how does that affect your practice, how does that affect your life, and what kind of organisational cultures are involved in making sure that you are well at work and it doesn't affect your practice, and you are able to seek help, and where do you go in that? Who's responsible for the health and well-being of midwives? Just themselves? Is it the employer? Is it the NMC? What's out there? And what I found initially is there's not a lot.
Yeah.
So I'm really hoping that something I can build through evidence-based research can be used by midwives, initially within sort of small pilot groups to see if it works, to see if it's beneficial, and what needs changing, what needs tweaking, what needs making right. And then if we pilot kind of a trial of use, then hopefully we can say, yes, it does work. It might not work, but I'm hoping we can make something that does work. And then you've got an evidence base. You know, we're talking about evidence-based midwifery all the time. Let's talk about evidence-based support for midwives as well. And that's what I hope to achieve throughout my PhD.
It's a really powerful thing to have the evidence behind it, I think.
Yeah.
And this is a really hard question, but do you have any idea when your project might be out there for midwives to use?
Right.
So we can all keep an eye out for it.
Goodness. Well, obviously follow my blog, and I will be putting new developments out there. But I do actually think, although the NHS would like something immediate, and I would too, to make something truly evidence-based and to make sure it works and doesn't actually harm anyone in any way, we need to do a thorough research process. And my PhD is 3 years long to begin with, and the pilot studies will be at the end of that, so a small group of midwives can kind of use this, I'm hoping, and say to me, yes, Sally, it's great, I feel so much better, I'm healed. I'll probably not heal, but this has been a benefit to me in X number of ways. And
Sure.
when I have that data, I can go forward and hopefully get funding, because I can't, spread this out to the whole of the UK without proper funding, proper security and
Yeah.
others measures, ethical issues to be considered. But if I can prove that it works, then I go forward and I say, how can I fund this? Who can fund this? Where does it go next? And eventually, yes, the big picture is to open it up to all midwives in the UK at least.
Yeah. And as I understand it, you were explaining that you'll be posting anonymously and that you'll have some access to sort of supportive cognitive behavioural therapy type support, perhaps. Is that sort of the overall
Well,
concept?
at the moment, what I'm putting together is a Delphi study, and I've just submitted the paper for that protocol today. And what will happen with that is we will get a bunch of experts together. Now, that's just not experts at the top of their game. That's midwives, that's people on the shop floor, as well as healthcare leaders, midwifery leaders, people in HR, people in occupational health, come together and tell me within a proper research format what needs to be prioritized. So should we prioritize online therapies, online CBT, chat rooms, blogging, people to story tell, tell their own stories, self-help techniques, information about where you can get other help, legal advice perhaps, and hopefully that expert panel will tell me what I need to prioritize when I'm building this thing.
Lovely. Sounds really exciting.
Yeah.
And so what brought you to study this topic? What sort of got you to that point?
Well, I've got a professional background in midwifery, and I've always been interested in media, technology, online groups, self-help groups, and I focused on what the role of social media is within healthcare through my master's degree. And then I thought, well, actually the most interesting thing there is how people go online when they don't want to do face-to-face stuff and they don't want to go and see their GP. They go online and they find other people with similar experiences, and find out how they deal with certain ailments, situations, could be mental health, physical health, and I found that concept really interesting. I also saw a lot in the midwifery workplace before, when I was practicing. I saw a lot of people in psychological distress and not knowing where to go, and I myself have my own ill health problems, and I turned to online help quite a lot to get through that. And so I embarked on this project, and as soon as I said, I'm interested maybe in doing something like this, tons of people just jumped on me and said, please do this, please, we need it so badly. And other people had started thinking about doing it with doctors, GPs, nurses, but not midwives. And it seems like perhaps they may be being left out, maybe at the bottom of the pile, or people often say nurses and midwives being kind of like the add-on bit. So I decided to choose midwives because it's my professional background, and we're all in the same boat kind of thing.
And you've talked about that idea of only midwives really understand midwives, because, every profession is different, but midwifery in particular is this brand of professional autonomy and having that mutual respectful relationship with the clients that you're working with that makes quite an interesting set of challenges. And
definitely. I mean, I went into NHS England to discuss my research project there, and I spoke with Jane Cummings, the head of nursing for England, and she said, why didn't you choose nurses? Why midwives? And I said, well, you know what, with nurses, you have child nurses, cardiac nurses, respiratory nurses, all these different types of roles where each role is individual, and I'm sure they have their own psychological issues that they're dealing with, traumatic incidents they're dealing with in their own workplace, and they're equally as valid, but it's just too vast. And midwives, whatever role you're in as a midwife, where it's management, supervisory, your job role is the same, always. You could be a home birth midwife, a birth centre midwife, labour ward midwife, child protection midwife, but ultimately you're dealing with pregnant women and families, babies, and protecting their kind of well-being throughout the pregnancy and childbirth journey, and that remains constant. So when you're researching one group of people, midwives just seem to fit that. And like I said, you could open it up in the future to midwives, doctors, nurses, dentists, whoever. I mean, it really could be a platform for all occupations.
And you could suit those. Perhaps they'll have their own part of the tool, so it's suited
Yes,
towards
they may
them.
need modifications or something different for their own personal needs, but we
Yeah.
won't know that until we sort of talk to different research groups.
It's up and running. So bullying, as I know personally, and as a lot of midwives know personally, is a massive issue. So what I wanted to ask you was, do you have any advice in this area? So if you were giving advice to a student or a newly qualified midwife, or indeed a qualified midwife who is being bullied by a colleague, what first steps would you advise them to take to perhaps make things a bit better?
Okay. Well, bullying obviously doesn't just have personal implications for the midwife being bullied. It also has wider implications for the organisational culture. So if you have those poor cultures in place where people aren't nurtured, aren't empowered, we all know what bullying is: nasty, just general nastiness, horrible, toxic working cultures. It not only affects that person, but the organisational maternity service as a whole, because patient care is affected. There's no doubt that patient care is affected, and you're more likely to be a compassionate midwife if you yourself feel cared for and valued. So we're actually affecting service quality and service delivery by not having open therapeutic work environments. So I'm hoping that's something that can be addressed as well. But if you are experiencing something, it's sometimes very difficult to actually stand up for yourself, stand up for other people. Your self-confidence can be low because you're being bullied. So the whole thing's a self-fulfilling prophecy, really. I think when you are faced with something like that, you have to look at your professional duties as well. So the NMC say that you must highlight concerns as soon as possible to either your direct line manager or supervisor, and it goes further up the chain if you're not listened to. And that's a professional obligation. It's in the NMC code. And the NMC have actually helpfully set up a raising concerns guidance, which is actually super helpful, and it does include student midwives in that. So what to do if you are faced with raising concerns, and you must follow those policies as well as your own trust policy or your own workplace policy, which sometimes can come into conflict. But again, if no one listens to you, you have to go higher. You have to go to your supervisor, you have to go to your regulatory body or your what's it called, your trade union. You have to go that high, because you cannot let things slide. You cannot put patient safety at risk because of poor organisational working cultures. And that's the bottom line. And with the new NMC code that's just come out, what I'm really impressed with is the fact that they actually acknowledge that as part of your professional duty, you must be supportive of other people who are other colleagues who are perhaps suffering with long-term health conditions and trying to manage that, or even performance issues. You know, nobody goes to work to mess up. People go to work to do a good job, and they need supporting in that. So I'm really glad that the NMC has acknowledged this within the new code. So actually, if people are bullying, they are breaking their professional code now. It's become that serious, and that recognition is so important, that people are starting to say this is the crux of the issue, and that's really refreshing to see.
It is, and perhaps they'll have real confidence in being able to bring these things up, because I think it's the issue, really. You don't feel valid in bringing those issues up because you think, oh, well, I'm a midwife, I've got to be tough, I've got to look after the women in my care instead of me. But it's a really good way of taking the temperature of an organisation. If you've got bullying going on, you know there are probably other areas.
But even the bullies, I mean, I don't want to get at bullies. There's a reason they are bullying.
No, I agree.
And it's because, you know, we always say mean people are unhappy people. That's my saying anyway. People who've got something nasty to say, they're unhappy in some way. And those people, I don't think, are going to work to cause havoc and bully and cause horrible, you know, ripples throughout the organisation, but it's happening. So why do they feel that kind of, that they have to act that way to assert themselves? I don't know what it is, but I don't want to blame the bullies either. I think they actually need support in their own way.
Absolutely no, I don't think there is a place for blame. There's a place for, you know, taking responsibility for your actions, but I don't think blame really ever helps.
Absolutely not.
And it's interesting because really the people who are being accused of bullying now are likely to have been in a culture training that wasn't that great either. Like, it's a known phenomenon that people who get bullied then display bullying behaviours, and it makes perfect sense. Why wouldn't that be the case?
Yeah, we definitely don't want to name and shame everyone. That the whole purpose of everything I'm trying to do is definitely to bring everybody up, not pull anyone down. So definitely we have to look at why people feel that they may be behaving in this way for some reason. That needs looking at separately, I think.
So you touched on this briefly, but I get asked a lot from midwives and from would-be applicants to midwifery who either have a mental illness or are just interested. They want to know whether they'll be supported well as midwives training with perhaps depression or an eating disorder. And I have to say, I know a lot of people who are excellent practitioners who do have either depression or a different mental illness. I've come across a few things. So I wanted to ask you, how would you go about supporting a colleague who had a mental illness in practice?
Okay, well, we all know the statistic, kind of one in four people has struggled with mental illness in some way. That has to apply to nurses, doctors, midwives as well. It just has to. We're not immune. We're not superpowers. So we know that that's going to be there in practice. I think there is this kind of stigma. There's always a stigma, really high stigma, particularly in healthcare professionals, because we're put on some kind of pedestal that we are superior beings, immune to any illness or any ill health whatsoever. And I think we do need to get past that first of all, so that people can speak openly about that. And stress, time off work for stress and sort of burnout now is actually overtaking physical reasons for taking time off work. So the musculoskeletal problems are number 2 on the list now. So we know that people are having this issue, and we need to be able to talk about it and support them. There's also this kind of thing that if somebody in the healthcare workplace is suffering with depression or something, then they're less able to do their job. Or we better not pile the work on them, or we better not give them that patient. And that's actually kind of another stereotyped view that people have, and it's not always the case. Sometimes they need extra work to make themselves feel valued again. You know, I can do this. I am a confident practitioner. And you have to treat everybody with individual kind of user needs. What do they need from me as a manager, me as a colleague, me as a friend? What do they need? And that's very personal for each person. But I think respect is a huge part. No judgment, absolutely no judgment, because everyone's fighting a battle you know nothing about. But then on the other hand, we have to reflect upon the fact that people with long-term conditions, or even short-term, may not be fit to practice. If your mental health is poor, your judgment can be impaired. You can make the wrong decision, the wrong call, and people don't often recognize in themselves that they are poorly, they are unwell, unfortunately. This is what the literature is telling me. So when they don't realize they're unwell and they carry on regardless, because they don't want to let people down, they don't want to let themselves down, they carry on and kind of either push that to the back of their mind or have no insight into how poorly they really are, then they can make poor decisions and poor judgments. And I think then it's about, again, your team being aware of that, your team saying, you know, are you out of character at the moment? It's those kind of subtle changes that can happen over time that people might ignore. And again, you don't need to be punitive towards that. What you need to do is say, how can I support you? Have you noticed this? Have you noticed this change? And again, unfortunately, the biggest words, 2 words that everybody uses at some point when they are poorly is "I'm fine." So you have that other dimension, really, where you want to care for somebody and you want to offer help, but they say "I'm fine." And again, I think that's when you need to escalate your concerns to your manager, your supervisor, occupational health, so those early interventions can happen on an individual basis.
So it's sort of making a culture of understanding and respect, but also being aware that people may need help.
If there is that culture, I think people are much more likely to come forward and say, I'm struggling. In a punitive culture, people are going to drive secrets underground and not tell anyone how they're feeling. But if they think, do you know what, if I do speak up, I am going to get the help, they're much more likely to do that. And I'm sure the NMC would much prefer everybody to refer themselves if their practice was impaired in any way, rather than have to be reported, or these punitive sanctions or disciplinary procedures for being unwell. I'm trying to find a better way, basically, for that.
Absolutely. Yeah, sounds really fascinating. I hope this is perhaps the beginning of looking at mental health for NHS staff differently,
Yes.
which I think needs to come. So I have a final question for you. Knowing what you know now, if you were a newly qualified midwife or you were a student midwife and you were starting to implement strategies to look after your own mental health, do you have any suggestions? What would you say?
I think the most important two things are, one, self-care, and another, self-awareness. So
Okay.
I would say self-care would be simple things. Eat well, sleep well. Don't give everything you've got until your battery runs out. Recognize when you're tired. Recognize when you need to step back, if you need to reflect, if you need to talk, if you need to go into a side room, or if you need to say, do you know what, I need to go home. It's all about being safe, both for you and for the patient. So that safety relies upon you recognizing your own abilities, your own health, your own well-being needs. So what do I need to keep safe? What do I need to keep fit and well? Whether that's music, whether that's running, whether it's animals, whatever it is. Where's my time here? Where's my work-life balance? And what am I able to do and what am I not able to do? And I need to keep those boundaries really, really clear. And that can be difficult when you're pressurized by people to keep with it, keep with the program, keep with the pace that we're all going at. And you're swept along and you're carried along. And you're also a student, so you want to impress people. You want to say, look how great I am. I can pass. Look at me. And you go that extra mile, and everyone goes that extra mile. And that's not to say you shouldn't challenge yourself. But when that challenging yourself goes to a state of danger of burning out, that is a problem. And again, I'm hoping this intervention will explain to people what burnout is, what stress in the workplace is, what is poor working cultures and poor working habits. So they can look at that as a resource and match themselves with it. Am I falling within this category? If yes, step back. If no, what am I kind of looking to do here? What are my kind of what are my goals and how can I achieve those safely?
Yeah, it's brilliant that you're looking into this in an official way, because I think how different would the culture be if we thought like that? Well, you know, am I on the borderline of being burned out before just being burned out and not being able to go into work? So I think realistically, as a student, a few times you will probably be extremely exhausted and have to take a couple of days off before, but it's recognizing that happened and perhaps putting in strategies to make sure
and also,
it doesn't happen again, if possible.
If a colleague says to you, you know, I need some time here, I need some time off, it's again not judging them, not like going, oh, for goodness sake, what have you got to be stressed about? You know, why are they taking time off? They're always taking time off stressed. What's that about? And again, I've seen and heard of incidents where people have taken time off for stress and they've been seen in the park playing with their children or their dog in the sunshine.
It sounds perfectly reasonable to me.
You get everybody back at work going, well, I can't believe they're off sick. Look at them. They're taking a sickie. No, that is self-care. That is getting better. If you had a poorly leg, you would take a paracetamol. If you have depression, you would take some sunshine. It's the same medicine. Okay, they are getting better. And it's that ideology we really have to reverse.
That kind of if it's too hot, get out of the kitchen kind of thing. It's not that great, but hopefully this is the beginning of things changing. So is there anything else that you would like to share?
Well, I'm pretty early on in my PhD at the moment. Like I said, I'm just getting together a group of experts who I can ask what needs to be prioritised within this intervention, and I hope to sort of do that throughout the rest of this year. And I'm playing with some platforms in terms of building it, tech, you know, the tech side of things and the graphical side of things, and hopefully I'll be able to build something next year that I can have a few little midwives play on.
Amazing. That's quick. That's really quick. So to wrap up, you're making this tool. We're not quite sure when it will be out, but we are very excited about it, and it could represent a change in the way we think about mental health for midwives. If you're being bullied, I'm really sorry you're being bullied. It's an awful thing to happen, but do feel confident and validated. You should go and talk to your manager, and you should be able to take it further and feel secure in your workplace environment. And if you've got a colleague who's mentally ill, or if you're mentally ill, be understanding about self-care, and also try and identify when things need to be intervened to keep things safe. So that's some fantastic knowledge you've shared with us today. Thanks so much. Thanks everybody for watching, and if you found this interesting, please consider sharing it with a midwifery mate, because I think this tool in particular we should all know about. Okay, lovely.
Sally, that was awesome. Thank you so much for your time. Now, I'd love to hear from you. What do you find most challenging in looking after your mental health as a midwife? And what do you think could be changed on an organisational trust level and also on a personal level to help with this? Please leave me a comment. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you again for another Midwife Diaries video.